So evening everybody, it's a bit strange doing it this way. I'm just going to talk to a screen, but hopefully everyone can hear me okay. My name is Paul Wilson, for those of you who don't know. On the first slide it says RCL, North for England Athletics, and for those who don't know, that means Regional Coach Lead. So what I do is I organise training events across the north of England, east and west, and what we do on those days is we get coaches along and athletes. And it's basically to try and work with other coaches, show them things that I might know or other coaches know, and just try and get all the throws coaches together and help bring on the athletes. And what we've done this year, I think we had about 60, 70 attendees. That was coaches and quite a lot of athletes as well. And we're looking to do that again, hopefully next year, depending on what happens with COVID. So that's my main role. And then also to work with, try and mentor some of the up and coming coaches and give them any help or guidance they need. So if anyone needs anything in the north of England or anywhere in the country, then we can share ideas. In the Midlands, the same person who does this role is Stuart Carlaw, and then in the south we've got Gary Power and Mark Bradford as well. So there's 4 of us covering with in charge of us all. So that's a little bit of background about what the RCL means. What we're going to do tonight is talk about, obviously, Scott Lincoln, what I've done with Scott, or what we've done together, should I say, over the years. And we've been on there for been together quite a long time now. So I'm just going to hopefully change the slide if it will. Just bear with me. So a little bit about me before we go on to Scott. I used to be a discus thrower until I got a serious knee injury, which was torn cruciate ligaments in my knee playing rugby. I've been coaching since 2005. I coach all the throws. I also coach some combined eventers for their events as well, including jumps and sprints. I've been lucky enough to coach to international standard in shot, discus, javelin and combined events for England, Wales, Great Britain and a couple of foreign nations as well. Like most of you guys that are actually watching at the moment, I'm just a club volunteer coach, nothing more. I say nothing more. If we didn't have people like yourselves out there, all volunteers, unfortunately our sport would die. So I coach at my local club, which is City of York AC. We've got a great setup there with a lot of coaches and a couple of them online now. Karen Buck, she looks after the sprints, and Les Grant, who does the sprints and hurdles, and has some good multi-eventers coming through as well. So they're doing really well. And as I said, I'm also the regional coach lead for the throws in the north. So for me and Scott, there's a couple of pictures there, how it began. So on the left picture, you'll see Scott with a funky hairstyle. That was when he was, I think he was first year, under 15 he might have been then. So it was just before I started coaching him. And then the picture on the right is Scott's first England athletics medal indoors. So there's just a bit of growth difference since then. So how it came about, Scott was recommended, like a lot of athletes are, he was recommended by his PE teacher. At the time, his personal best with a 5 kilo shot under 15 weight was 13 to 27, and he finished 12th at the English schools. He was gliding at the time. So when Scott came to me, like most school teachers, they'll teach the glide or the run back just so they actually get a better understanding of what they're actually doing. So the next one we're going to talk about is just Scott's progression. So this is just trying to go back and just give you a bit of insight of what Scott used to do, and going through the ages, and then when we changed onto the rotation, etc. So 2008, so that's when I started coaching Scott. So that's 12 years ago now. 1327. Following year, he jumped to 1560 with a 5, through the 6 kilo 1310 and 726, a little bit further at 1334. 2010, he moved up and started throwing the 6 kilo 1522, and as you can see there, 726 1344. All the time this is just working on the glide. And what I was starting to notice a lot of the time was, because Scott's background was rugby, he was very explosive, but also he had real good balance and a lot of good rhythm. So we started noticing that sometimes he would rotate, and when he was delivering the ball, instead of going straight through the ball, he was rotating away from the ball. So 2011, Scott threw 1650 with a 6, and then the 726 1449. So we'd already started talking about trying the spin, We introduced a couple of bits. We tried it. We were out in Malta on a warm weather camp, and he tried it out there, and it was a bit off balance. But at least he tried it, and he gave it a good go. So Scott was quite keen to try it, and then we got invited down to an England. I think it was British Athletics actually, and we met up with Don Babbitt from America, and he was over with Reese Hoffer, and there's also Adam Nelson there. And I got a real good talk with Don Babbitt, and ever since then we've been quite good friends. But what we were talking about is, why would you change to do rotation? And his first idea was, well, if you can throw within a metre of your glide, it's a good time to try it and a good time to change. So what we did, Scott threw, did the glide, and did a couple of throws of rotation. It was in 30-40 centimetres of what he was throwing off the glide. A little bit wayward, a little bit out of control, and Don basically agreed with what we were saying. It's time to change. So luckily, that was in about October time. There used to be training camps organised by Jeff Capes and Mark Proctor. So that's how come these guys were over. I think I can't remember his name. Malcolm Fenton was also involved in them times. So what we decided was, right, that winter we're going to change. We're going to go into rotation and start right from scratch. So luckily for me, because I'm an ex-discus thrower, I had a good idea of the rotation for the discus. Although I used to do rotational shot, I wouldn't say I was the best by any means. But it meant that I had a little bit of an understanding to start it off straight away, and then hopefully we could develop together. So we worked all the winter, and what I used to find was when Scott was rotating, sometimes he'd lose his balance. And then what he was doing was he'd have his left arm out just to balance himself. A lot of people used to wonder, why do we start like that? And that was the main reason. So he'd have his left arm in a straight line going out to the side, whereas a lot of rotational shot putters, including Scott now, use the left arm to help accelerate, whereas we had it stuck out. So if you look at me, arm there and the other arm straight out to the side, it's like as if he's squeezing his shoulder blades. So that's how we worked on it. So the next slide you'll see when he started the progression. So the first year was 6 kilo. Scott was also selected for the Great Britain Juniors. He was number 1 in the country, and he jumped to 17 meters 91. He also competed against Tom Walsh, who obviously we know Tom Walsh is now, but he threw against Tom at the England Championships in Bedford, and unfortunately Tom beat him that year, but Tom's gone on to great things, as we know, and Scott's trying to chase him down. But he also threw the 726 1601. The following year, no longer under 20, now under the 23. There's a progression every year, as you can see. 2013 1650, 2014 1759, 2015 1854. What I've put there is it says Thunder. Now what that means, Scott was doing the British Championships at Birmingham, and it was the first time he won his first title. But what happened was he was leading into the third round, and then Scott Ryder overtook him, and then Zane Dukeman overtook him. So Scott dropped down to third. And then in the last round, it was pouring down rain, and actually the British champs had music playing, and AC/DC Thunder was playing, and Scott threw his final throw, threw a big PB, and won the championships. So that was the start of things to come, because at the indoor season that year he came second. So, but that was the start, and then as you'll see later on, he's won British Championships every year since, indoors and outdoors, and hasn't been beaten. So 2016, he threw 1959. That was his new PB, getting ever closer to the 20 meters mark. And then when he did that, he was actually put into funding. So he became a funded athlete by British Athletics. But that was only for a year. And what we found was that Scott felt a lot of pressure. So he felt pressure to perform. He went out to a competition abroad and threw just over 19 meters, which was a season's best at the time. But got told basically he needs to throw further. So he just felt that bit of pressure, which he wasn't used to. And then the year after, he got straight away got taken off the funding. So he was on it for a year. And because he didn't improve in that one season, he was taken off the funding, unfortunately. So the year after, he threw 1924, which was an improvement. So he had something to prove to people. And that gave him that bit of fire in his belly. So what we did was we decided we needed things to change to try and break different barriers. So Scott was able to, this was 2019, So Scott was able to change his working hours. Scott works full time as a builder all this time. So what he did was he was able to cut his hours, and he had one day off a week. So that meant he could either have recovery or train a little bit more. And what we were finding was there was more positivity coming through this. And what we did was set a plan of attack during that winter to say, right, this is what we've got to work against. A lot of it was, and Scott will agree, was mental, as in that he needed to believe that he could do it. And where we are now is a real good place. And it has been for like the past year or so. But I think it's just sometimes with all athletes, they lack that little bit of confidence. But with Scott, he gained the confidence and felt, yes, I can do this. And started he wanted to prove to people and say, look, I can show you what I can do. Not just in the UK, but across Europe and then ideally across the world. So what we were doing was we decided we wanted to attack his weaknesses, which were in the gym. And also technically, so we both sit down. What me and Scott always do, have done now for a few years, is it's not like a dictatorship. It's something where we'll sit down together, we go through what we want to work on in the winter. Scott writes a list, I write a list, and then between us we come out with the objectives. So what we do is we say, right, we want to work on this part of the technique, that part of the technique. You're weak in this area in the lifts, or you're strong in this area. We want to work them together, or you're too slow, whatever it might be. But what we do is we agree it together. And what I believe with that is because we do agree it together, we get the outcomes that we actually need. And straight away, Scott takes then ownership, because I can't be at every session for Scott. I work full time as well. So I don't have the opportunity to actually work with Scott all the time. So Scott does a lot of his lifting on his own. And then on the weekend, we'll normally lift and train together. So it's a little bit different to some setups for international athletes, whereas I'm coaching groups of athletes, so Scott's part of the squad. However many shot putters come down, Scott's in that squad. It's no different. Scott doesn't get treated any different in the winter when we do all the hard work. He gets shouted at just as much as the other athletes, and they'll vouch for that. So, but what we did was we set a goal, and Scott wanted to break 20 meters, and that was the target. So once we put all that together, Scott went out to Poland for the European Team Championships with Great Britain. And during the day before the competition, which he doesn't normally throw, he sent me a video to say, watch this. And it was obviously a really good technical throw, but he broke the 20-meter barrier. He didn't think it was as far, and Tor Gustafsson was there, and so was Sophie McKinnon, and they were both saying, well, that looked really fast. So they went and got a tape and measured it. So straight away, that gave Scott the ability and the mental attitude to know that, yes, I can throw 20 meters. I personally had not seen him throw 20 meters. So it took a while till I was able to see him do a 20-meter throw, but that gave him something then to go out there and achieve. So what happened next was Scott went over 20 meters. He did it twice. So went 20:39 in Czechoslovakia. And then a few days later, he was throwing in a slippy circle and broke 20 meters again. This time, though, it was in trainers. So he was slipping off the back. So he put a trainer on his left foot, but it was still able to break 20 meters. So Scott was happy as Larry, obviously. He was buzzing because he'd done everything we could. And I was just, for me personally, I was just a little bit gutted that I couldn't actually be there. Because obviously you work hard together and you want to see people achieve it. So he broke 20 meters. I think he's number 5 on the all-time list now. He's got a few names that he's chasing down that hopefully would have done this year, but that's now on the back burner until next year. So yes, that's how we got to the 20 meters on some of it. So the next slide, I've put on there a week in the life of Scott. So as I said earlier, Scott's works as a full-time builder, so he's got a hard manual labour job. But what we've always said is that when Scott's working, it actually does help him, because what it does is it keeps him moving all day rather than seizing up. So sometimes he's up and down ladders, or I think recently he's been in a digger, or he's laying bricks. So he does a lot of manual work, and that just gives him that natural strength. Because one thing I did mean to say is that Scott never started lifting until he was over 16. So I know a lot of people lift early and everything else, but Scott didn't actually do any weights till then. And what we did was we'd sometimes do some technical work, but we never actually did what I'd call proper lifting. So Scott learned the Olympic lifts, like your clean, your squats and such like, but we just used his natural strength and worked on what his abilities were. So what we'll do is I'll go on to the next slide and just tell you a little bit more about the week in the life. So Monday, Scott works as a builder 7:30 till 4. Then he'll come down to the track in York normally. Obviously at the moment it's different, so he's actually able to train at his unit. What he'll normally do, just to give you an idea, so what I'll do is I'll go through each day and what sessions we do. So on a Monday he'll come down, we'll do the technical work first. So to start off with, Scott will do 3 fixed foot standing throws. So if anyone wants to ask questions about this after, that's fine. He does 3 fixed foot standing throws. Then he does 3 standing throws, but with a reverse. And what he did was he moved back off the sock board, probably about a foot. So the idea of that is so that he can try and drive over his left leg. So what we're trying to do is get him to go past the left leg as he hits it. It's something that me and Scott work on, and it works well for Scott. And it's something we've always done now. Then he'll go on to doing the half turn. So his right foot in the middle. It does a little bit of a rock back to his left. So then when he makes contact with the right foot onto the ground, he gets the acceleration. So what he's doing is he's keeping his knees nice and tight. But what we're trying to do there is work on keeping his shoulders straight, keeping his head up, and just keeping him balanced so his weight stays over his right leg so he can load his right leg. And then what we do after that is we go on to the full turn. So everyone says you need to do hundreds of throws or in various disciplines. The way I always work is we try and do quality over quantity. So some nights Scott will only maybe do 10 full turns, depending on how the work's been, how tired he is, what the weather's like, and what he's feeling on that day. Some days he could go up to 15, 20 throws. But what we try and do is we actually try and just manage it. So if Scott starts dropping off, starts overthinking things, then that's what we try and do. Then is say, right, let's just stop now. If he hits a nice one, that's the end of it. It's normally me who calls it, although Scott decides himself sometimes. But also what we've done in the past is Scott's come down, and I'm not meaning now, this is a few years ago, but he'd come down sometimes in the wrong frame of mind, and he'd do a few throws, just be all over the place, and just his head wasn't in the game. So what I'd do is say, right, go for a walk around the track, or go get a drink or something and come back in 10, 15 minutes. And if that doesn't work, then it's a case of stop for the night. I always remember talking to Adam Nelson, and he said that he'll go down to training, and if he's not feeling it, he'll pack his bag and go straight home. And the reason is that he starts changing things that he doesn't need to change. So it's the same with Scott. I mean, the other night, Scott was throwing on Monday, and him being saying about his back being tight. So he did a couple of throws, and I saw him bend over, and I says, "Is your back pulling again?" He says, "Yeah." I says, "Right, stop." So Scott stopped throwing on Monday. I think he'd done 5 throws. Didn't throw yesterday, and then we threw this morning. But that rest has helped his back. So a lot of that for me is like knowing Scott. Obviously, I've worked with him for 12 years, but you get to learn, and you sometimes learn as coaches, and you guys will know yourselves that an athlete, the ones that you're going to get some athletes that will fake it because they don't want to do the hard work, and then once you develop the athletes, you'll find the ones that are actually saying the truth, and you can't tell them what to do, but their body will tell them. And how I say is, look, just be honest with me. We've got to think long term, not short term. So there's no point Scott carrying on throwing Monday night and then missing a week of training. So that's something that we always communicate, and I'm a big believer that communication's key with all coaches and athletes. So that's what we do on a Monday night, throws wise. And then what Scott normally does after that is he does some medicine ball throws, probably with a 6 or 7 kilo medicine ball, and he'll do standing throws, but using 2 arms into his chest and pushing. So he's just basically doing a deliberate standing throw. He does it off the right leg, and then he also does it left-handed as well. And then he also does the same for the half turns. And it can vary between 10 and 15 throws of each side. The reason is just to try and keep his balance and help him to be able to throw left and right-handed, because it just keeps his stability as well. So we do that, and then Scott will do a sprint session, which isn't anything out of the way. I mean, at the end of the day, Scott's 21 stone, and he's a solid 21 stone. So he normally runs on the grass as long as it's not wet and slippy, and he'll do a 20 to 30 metre sprint. Sometimes he does a rolling start. Sometimes he'll do it where he's actually doing a crouch start. But he's got a good training partner in David Todd, who's quite nippy as well. So what they do is they actually push each other in the sprint. So it's not like a leisurely jog or anything. It's actually Scott going quite hard for it as well. And when we go to Portugal, when we do warm weather training, we do a little bit of a quad test, just to give you an idea. And Scott normally wins the sprints out of all the squad, and that includes we've got an international javelin thrower in there. We've got a couple of multi-eventers. As I say, and normally Scott comes out on top, and he actually normally wins. The only one he doesn't win is he doesn't win the overhead shot. He throws 1950 overhead shot. He wins the standing long jump. Normally, standing long jump's incredible for his size. To give you an idea, he jumps, I think it was 3.40 meters, and he can do a standing box jump 145. Last time we did it, we don't always do all the testing, and we don't do the 3 bounds. A lot of people use the quad test and do 3 bounds. For Scott, we just don't do it just because we don't want to put a lot of pressure through his shins and his knees. And once again, with Scott, is knowing what he does and what his abilities are. So Scott sometimes is prone to like shin problems if he runs on the track too much, or we do too much bounding. So we do a lot of that on the grass as well. So then on to the Tuesday, Scott now. So since the winter of 2019, Scott doesn't work on a Tuesday now, so his Tuesdays and Thursdays off. So what Scott does is he does a lifting session, and that's all he does that day. But what we do is we split it. So we do 6 to 8 lifts, and he does half in the morning, goes home, has his lunch, goes back again in the afternoon, does the second session, and then normally, like he's done tonight, he'll jump into the hot tub. And he's actually got the massaging legs as well, but it doesn't feel they actually work as well. But now they've got a hot tub at home, he's found the benefits of that as well, which has been good. Wednesday, exactly the same as a Monday, so no different. The only thing I would say I haven't mentioned is when Scott warms up for his technical sessions, I think it's very important that what he does is he warms up exactly the same for that as he does for a competition. So nothing changes. So what he's doing is as he's going through the process, it's exactly the same. So when he goes to a competition, he's going to get the same feeling and should throw as well as he would do at training. So that's one thing that we put in a few years ago now, just to make sure he did it, and he knows it off by heart. So it makes it a lot easier for me. Sometimes we do assisted stretches, but that's normally for Scott's lower back and for his glutes because they do get tight. And unfortunately, at the moment we can't get to see a physio because normally Scott will get loosened off. Probably every 3 to 4 weeks. He's got a physio up in Northallerton called Ed Pratt. And he's great, and he's worked with Scott since I've worked with Scott near enough, and he looks after him and does whatever he needs, gives him all the exercises that he might need and stretches that he needs, so that works really well. Then on a Thursday, what we do is no work again, like I say, and what he'll do is he'll do a technical session normally in the morning around 9-10 o'clock, then do half the lifting again, and then the other half of the session in the afternoon. So what we're trying to do is give him longer recovery, and he's benefited this winter a lot more with it. What he's found is that he's able to recover quicker, but he's also able to lift heavier. So when we've gone into the heavy phase, he's been able to lift more than what he's done before, and he hasn't felt lethargic or tired for the next session or whatever we're going to do. So Friday, Scott's at work again, and what he does on that day, he's got, after work, it's just a rest. So we try and do 2 rest days a week. This is not just for all the training that he's done, but also for the work. Because as I say, on a Monday, if he's training in York, he's not going to get home till probably gone 9 o'clock, 9:30, and he's leaving for work at 7 in the morning. So he's got a long day. So he does need that recovery time. The Saturday session, once again, normally this would be at York, but he's been doing it in his lockup at the moment. Does a technical session. This would normally be about 9 o'clock in the morning, and this would normally be with his squad. And then what he does straight after that, he goes into the gym at York Sport, gets on, does his full lifting session in one go, and that's it. So the rest of the weekend, then he's got recovery. So what he's done then is he's got plenty of time to recover, ready for Monday for work, and then also to do another technical session, which is what we want. To give you an idea, I was asked about Nick asked me about what we do lifting wise. We do a lot of Olympic lifts. I say a lot, probably not as much as most people do. We do cleans, we do power cleans, we do squats, we do full squats, half squats. We do explosive squats with bands. We do bench press. We do bench press with chains. We do bench press with bands. We do bench press where I did a masterclass not long ago where I'm pushing down on the bar. So I'm pushing down all our weight onto his chest. Scott's got maybe 120 kilo on it, and then he explodes up with the bar. I let go of it, and we just do that for reps. So what he's doing is he's pushing against me. We do various exercises. It's hard to describe because a lot of them are more shot put specific. So he does a NIDA press. It's a bit like a stud push press, but in between the push press and the bench press, but stood up. So it's on it's hard to show on the camera, but it's a diagonal angle it's pushing from his chest. And he also, whenever he does bench press, he doesn't have a wide grip bench press, he has it quite close, just to try and mirror the shot. He does a shot put press where he has the bar with a weight on top that goes into the mine for the people that have used it before, pulls it into his neck, pushes it out with 25 kilo plates on it, plus a 20 kilo bar, and I catch it and then pass it back to him. And we do some weird and wonderful things where he'll stand on a wobble board, and I'm throwing a medicine ball at him in different angles, above his head, to the side he's got a catch. So there's quite a few different things that we try and vary. It does a lot of explosive work. It does a lot of bounce, box jumps. He'll do, say, I don't know, maybe 8 squats and straight away he's going to do 8 box jumps, or 5 bounce onto a box. Or do some bench press and straight away he's got to move the bar out, the bench out, and do press up claps for the same number. Or he's got to lay under the bar and do where he's doing pull-ups onto the bar. And then what we always do is at the end of the session we do a little bit, what I just call it auxiliary. So they do 6 exercises for core, and then they go on the bike. So the bike's a bit like a fartlek. They'll do 10 seconds as fast as they can, 20 seconds easy for 6 minutes. When it's in the winter time, we do it for a little bit longer. But it's just to help the cardio, but also just to get the legs working as well, and just trying to push through it as much as we can. Yeah, we do any kettlebells. Some people asked me that in the past, and we do medicine ball and stuff like that. But all in the winter train. I'm just trying to see if I'd put on there. That's fine. I was checking. Yeah, so I've got it. 3 meters 40 standing long jump Scott did, and 1920 overhead shot. So yeah, so it's just what we've worked on. So Scott's technique. So right at the start, when we went to rotation, obviously I was talking, like I said, to Don Babbitt. But what I also did was I spoke to Brian Oldfield in America, who, while I was, unfortunately, he died. I think it was either last year or the year before. So I used to speak to Brian a lot, and he gave me quite a lot of ideas of how he used to throw. Because people say, "Oh, who do you match? Who do you copy?" And we never really copied anyone, but what we did do is looked at different athletes' techniques, but decided what works for Scott. So my own opinion is this is Scott's technique. So like everything I'm talking to you tonight about is just Scott. It doesn't mirror anyone else in the squad. Scott's an individual. Scott's himself. He's not Tom Walsh. He's not Ryan Krauser. Or anyone like that. And just like the other guys will do that I coach, they have their own technique. There might be little bits that drop in there, but at the end of the day, this is just about Scott. So yes, I spoke to Brian Oldfield. Also, I speak to Jeff Capes a lot, probably every week. He's been a great help. He's always encouraging me, and he's helped me along the way. So I've known Jeff since I was a kid. So that's always great to have someone that I can talk to. And then more recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've spoken to Dale Stevenson, Tom Walsh's coach. So what I'll do is I'll send a video over there, either to New Zealand or America, and say, "Can you have a look at this? We're working on this, but something's just not right." So sometimes you need another pair of eyes. And as all coaches, in my opinion, well, I keep saying my opinion, but you're always learning. So I don't know everything. I never admit to knowing everything, but I'll always ask. And then, or some people might just volunteer their information anyway. And all I ever say to people is, or what I do is, I listen, and then what I think might work, I'll use or I'll try. So, or Scott, like for Scott himself, he'll think of things and he'll ring me, or I'll be outside somewhere and I'll be trying to drill for Scott. So what we do is we bounce off each other, and we've tried things and some things have worked, some things haven't worked, but always just be open-minded, and that's what we've tried to do. We've tried to be as open-minded as possible. And as I say, right at the start, what we did was Scott used to have his left arm up for balance. And then we just started introducing where he used to bring his left arm in. So some people use it to accelerate, where they'll throw the left arm out and then catch it. And what Scott would do is, if he did that, he'd go off balance. And what he'd do is he'd pull his left shoulder down into the circle. So we were just trying to keep him more upright, more balanced. But then what we were finding sometimes is that he'd still throw his left arm away. So what we introduced was what's called, we grab the pole, where sometimes I'll stand in the middle of the circle just to the side. Scott will do a turn and he's not allowed to hit me with his left arm. Believe me, he's hit me a few times and it does hurt when he hits you with his arm. But what it does is it's just something that it sits in his brain thinking, oh, I can't hit him, he stood there, I don't want to hurt him. And then he actually wraps into the left arm, so that way he can work his legs underneath. So it's something we don't really need to do now. We did it once indoors just to show some people what we used to do. But now he's that good at actually getting a real good wrap at it. We've come away from that. So that's something that we developed over time. And then the other thing, what we've done is a lot of the time he used to pull his left shoulder down on release and it hit the ball over the top. So he wasn't always in control, and a lot of the time it'd go quite left. Whereas what we've worked on this winter, which I can explain what we've done. So after Scott, I know I'm jumping around, I apologise for that, but when Scott threw 2039, we decided to sit down, how we're going to break 21 metres, how we're going to qualify for the Olympics, and what do we need to change. So the people that used to see Scott throw would always say, oh, he's got a tiny base, how does he throw for it? But Scott's that quite strong, but he's more explosive than anything. So, and it's something we talked about anyway. So what we decided was, one of the biggest things we wanted to work on was Scott getting his right foot to land in the middle of the circle. This way Scott could have a proper throwing base and actually then throw over the left leg and deliver the ball. That was our priority. So what we decided was we were going to work really hard. We put a couple of cones out where because Scott used to do what's called, or I call anyway, cutting in. So he'd come off the back of the ring, cut his right leg short instead of sweeping it outwards. So he did like what we used to call like a run through, which was great for speed. But what would happen was, as Scott's right foot was about to come down, it'd push off the left, so he'd jump into the middle, and that would then cause him to go too far forwards and have no base. So when he's got no base, he basically can't use his legs. So what we decided was, right, we're going to try and work on getting his right leg to sweep out more, kick a cone to the side of his left foot, or to reach it. He doesn't have to actually kick it, but try and reach it. And then as he got there, then he could reach to the middle and be like more slow and deliberate. And then once that right foot planted, was then to accelerate. So sometimes Scott would accelerate too early, and then what he'd do is he'd push past with his right leg. So his right foot would then go past the middle and leave him with a short base. So this was what we worked on all winter, and we've worked really, really hard. And now it's second nature for Scott. So now his right foot, we say is deliberate. So he's really long and deliberate with his right leg. And then as it hits the middle, the left foot comes through, and we call it close knee. So his leg's like just near enough rubbed together to get his left foot through. And then because he's already wrapping with his left arm, he can actually then attack the throw. So we're working from the ground up. And this is paid dividends in the training that we've done. One of the other changes that we did was Scott would sometimes on release is he'd drop his left shoulder, which I'd explained a little bit earlier. So what we've worked on is him keeping his spine nice and straight, keeping his posture up, keeping his shoulders up and his head up. So Scott's always been one for like, he sees the ball go when he throws, but what he'd do is he'd pull the left arm down or left shoulder down, and then he'd miss the throw. And what I mean by miss the throw is he didn't get through the ball and couldn't deliver going straight through it. Sometimes now he does it, he's getting it right more and more now than he has done before, but it's something that we're still working on. And Scott knows when he does it, he connects. So those are the two main things that we've worked on all winter. So since October till now, And now all we do when it comes to the season start, we believe that the technique is set. So when it comes April, May, that's the technique. We're sticking with it. We're not going to do any changes. We'll save them for the winter. So we'll make a list during the season what we want to work on. But what we do is we stick to that format. And then normally at a training session, we'll do one or sometimes two things that we'll work on. So today when we were throwing, it was a case of, because Scott hadn't thrown for a couple of days, take it easy off the back, stay smooth, get the right foot to the middle, then just attack it. Once he did that once or twice, we moved on to the next phase, which was just working on keeping his left shoulder up on delivery and getting it off the fingers or extending over the stop board. So we're trying to do it so he can actually get his armpit over the stop board. So that's what we've been doing today. So we did a training session this morning. So the technique's always evolving, and I've already got ideas to discuss with Scott come September, which we don't discuss during the season. It's on the back burner because the idea is that hopefully if the British champs go ahead, and Scott's also been invited to a couple of competitions in the Czech Republic where he threw his PB last year. They're going ahead in August and September, so there is a chance that Scott could still throw this year. So we're treating this season as if there is a season. So along the way, we've done the Valhalla virtual throws comps. He's done 2 of them, and both times he's thrown over 20 meters, which is incredible to throw that off a wooden board with no competition. Although there is competition on the video, but there's no atmosphere, there's no one there, there's no one to push him. So to do that, incredible for me as a coach, for Scott to be able to do that. And we've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks. So that's been really good to have that. We've also tried doing it so his season is continuing. So as far as Scott's aware, he's still throwing in competitions. So the only thing we're doing differently is we're not doing what you normally, if some people would taper down or drop weights or anything, we're just carrying on as normal. Sometimes we'd change the ball size, which if people want to ask about that later, that's fine. I can explain that in more depth. But yes, yeah, so that's what we've been working on technical wise. So I said, this is what Scott works on. So I'm not saying what Scott's doing will work for you. There's a lot of other things, but it's too in depth without having Scott with me to show you and to do the positions. It's a bit awkward to go through. But if people have any questions there, I'm happy to answer. So that's Scott's technique, really. So there you go. Yeah, that's the changes. So I've already gone through all that. The change in the bottom. One of the other positions we used to do, I didn't go, is when I was talking to Brian Oldfield, he always say, turn your hand over, have your palm to the sky, sit the ball in there and do a press action. So we used to try that with Scott and push it as far back as you can. And we found that we tried it for a year or so, and what we find is if some things don't work, at the end we'll change it. So we moved it, just moved it and rotated his hand so his palm was actually facing the way he was going to throw. Grabbing the pole, I've already explained that. Running off the back is what I was explaining, but now he's sweeping, which we find is a lot more balanced now as well, which is good. And the delivery and the changes we've made on that. So I've explained all that already. So the season ahead, Scott started well indoors. Title number 10, he was gutted. He had a foul over 20 meters. He wanted to break 20 meters indoors. COVID-19 arrived, unfortunately, and come March, I think it was March 17, everything stopped at the track where we train. So we had to come up with a plan. Scott bought some wood, put a stop board on it, and started throwing into an old net that we had for our old track in his lockup. So that's how he was training. We're doing it virtual sessions by video. So Scott video call me. We had to work different ways. And what we didn't want to do is we didn't want to change anything because we didn't know how serious at that time COVID-19 was. So we wanted to keep going. We thought there might be a season, and how long we'd be in lockdown for, we didn't know. So that's how we worked, and we just continued all the way. And now Scott's got an area of private land that he can actually put his stop board and his piece of wood on there. And now I'm able to now do one-on-one sessions. So I'm doing that like once a week with Scott now. So that's been quite a godsend, really, for him being able to throw, and like now we can actually do some more training together. As I put on there, we're hoping for some end of season competitions. I haven't heard anything yet, but hopefully the British champs where Scott can defend his title. I got an invite for Scott yesterday for a couple of comps in Czech Republic. But whether we do them or not, we don't know, because anything you do now, Scott's big goes to the European Championships, which he'd already qualified for, and also for the Olympics, which he hadn't qualified for, but that doesn't start qualifying period again until December. And by then we'll be in hard training for the winter for next season. So it's something that me and Scott will talk about over the next month or two. Once again, it's not my decision. We both have our own say, so we always make sure that everything's discussed. And like I said earlier, there's no dictatorship. It's a case of work together and discuss everything together. So next I've got, so British title number 11 is the next target. Selection for the European Indoor Championships for 2021. European outdoor selection for next year. And then obviously the big one, Tokyo. And then long-term goals. Jeff knows it as well. We'd love to get Jeff's record. So that's the big target. That's what we're hoping to achieve. So that's it, basically, for me. I think there's a few questions that I know you've probably been gathering up, but I'm happy to answer it. And if I can answer it anyway, and I'll explain it in my terms. And I'm not saying my terms is always the correct way, but it's how I would tell it to the athletes that I coach.
Okay, that's really, really good. I really enjoyed that. I've written quite a lot of notes in terms of reflection there, so thanks very much for sharing that, Paul. I'm going to try and publish some of the questions as they're coming in. So like I've said before, if you do want to ask a question, by all means fire away. It makes it much easier for us if you put a question mark at the end of it. But there's already a lot coming, so we'll just get cracking, I think. So I'll try and publish this. If I close that presentation and I go on to this. Yeah, so first question in that we've got from Dave Calloway. So thanks, Dave. How did you break through those mental barriers? I know Scott's already put in the chat that he's happy to sort of answer some of these as well. But from your perspective, as a coach, how did you help Scott break through some of these mental barriers?
I'll be honest with you, it was really hard at times, because there was one night Scott came down and nothing was going right, and it was pouring down rain. He just wanted to quit. He'd had enough. He felt that the world was falling down on him and everything else. And it's really hard to see, not just an athlete, but someone that you treat as your friend and that you've known for years. And it's a case of trying to bring them back up. So it's hard to say, because I treat all the athletes the same, but just trying to give him that confidence and give him that lift. And what we've done now is, and I'm sure Scott will tell people if they want you to, is that he's now speaking to a sports psychologist at Leeds University that we've been put in touch with, and he speaks to him probably 3 to 4 weeks. I know he spoke to him beginning of this week, and he's given him a couple of ideas to help him when he goes into the circle more than anything. But he's got a real good support team, and I think that's great for any athlete. So there's obviously me as the coach. I set everything, but he's got a physio and he's got a nutritionalist in George Robinson. And as I say, he's got the guy in Leeds who's the sports psychologist. So it's a hard question to answer, to be honest, because I don't think you break the mental barriers. What you do is you discuss, and then probably the easiest way of saying it is you discuss and overcome. So by Scott being open and talking about things, we've had chats over the last couple of weeks about how he's feeling because he can't compete. Normally this time of year he'd be abroad competing, and he's missing it, and he's needing to find things to do. So it's trying to find things that will keep Scott mentally working. Whereas on a Monday night now he's at home by 6 o'clock. Well, normally it's 9 o'clock. So then he's not doing this. He's not in the same routine. Whereas Scott's really good when he's in a routine because he sticks to it. So I'm sorry, Dave, I don't really know the best way of answering that. Apart from all I ever say is talk, communicate, and once you know the athletes, hopefully they'll all open up to you and tell you. I mean, as most of the coaches that are on it will know, the athletes tell you more than they'll probably even tell the parents or the boyfriends, girlfriends, because they feel they can trust you. And it's a good trust, is that, and that's what I believe with Scott. I could trust Scott with anything, and vice versa. So I don't really know how else I can answer that, I'm afraid.
I hope that answers it. Question in from Dominic. Just want to hear more about using the left arm for acceleration.
Yeah, so we don't really use the left arm for acceleration. What I was trying to explain is when Scott's left arm used to be out and he was squeezing his shoulders back and like having his chest forward, we just use that for balance, and then it'd hit the middle, grab the pole like I was saying, and then he'd wrap it if he was like hugging into it. And what he does now is he swings, people say, but he'll swing his left arm, and then his left arm moves, but we don't use it for acceleration. What we try and do is get his legs working ahead of his left shoulder. So all the time we're trying to get the legs ahead and keep the body behind. So then he works on getting that torque. The only time he probably uses his left arm is on delivery, but even then I wouldn't say he uses it. We don't work on that, so we don't look at it as ways to hit it with the right arm. It's just the case we work more on the shoulders on delivery. So the left arm we don't use for acceleration. I'm sure Scott would agree with that anyway.
Yeah, Scott's answering some questions in the chat as we go through as well. Right. So yeah, Scott might be able to give his sort of opinions on that. Should be great. But thanks for that question, Dominic. So question in from Peter. So given Scott's job as a builder, which you mentioned earlier, how do you manage recovery? And I know he said he's currently sitting in a hot tub, so I imagine that's part of his recovery and relaxation. But how else do you manage Scott's recovery around his what can be quite a hard job?
It's one of these things. Until Scott comes down to the session, you never know how he's going to feel. So if he's been up and down ladders all day, his legs are whacked. So what we try and do is do a short technical session. So what we might do is cut down his standing throws, cut down his full turns, and it might even be a case where he just does half a session. Or his back might be tightening because it's been cold, and when it's winter, he's outside obviously working. So what we do is, and this is where it comes back again to the trust and communication. Scott will normally tell me how he feels, and I speak to Scott every day of the week anyway. Before we get to training, and I'll say, how are you feeling, or how's it gone today, and stuff like that. So I know what to expect when he gets to training. And that makes a difference, because then you preempt him what he can do, what he can't do, and then also what he's done from the last session. And then when he's on his days off, he just does his own training that is already preset, unless he's got a niggle. So we manage the recovery that way. So if he's got a tight lower back, he won't squat as deep, or he won't squat as heavy, or I might even miss the squats. So Scott's old enough. I mean, Scott's 25, 26 now, so he knows how to recover himself. And sometimes I'll say, look, you need to get booked in with your physio, and he'll go get a loosen off. So it's not actually, it doesn't, we've been lucky as in Scott hasn't had serious injuries in the sense that he's had to miss the sport. But what we do is we have recovery time where I'll say, right, have this week off lifting, or have this week off totally training. Like I said on Monday, what we did on Monday was we said, right, I stopped doing throwing after one, I think I did 3 rotations, stopped, did a light lifting session Tuesday, didn't throw last night, so I had another recovery, and then we threw this morning. So that's how we try and manage it. So a lot of it Scott does himself, to be honest with you.
So is there any sort of like monitoring tools that you have in place to manage that recovery, or is it more of a qualitative sort of just discussion, like open, honest feedback from
everything we do is communication.
Okay, so there's nothing you would suggest in terms of like load monitoring and things like that?
Well, the only thing we do is if I start noticing that he's struggling in training, this is the difference, because I've worked with him for so long. I know how to set the session plans, how to do his. So if he does 5 weeks on and then a week of deload, we know that works for Scott, and we know that during the winter he normally needs to have a full week off to recover. So it's what works for Scott, and then obviously the other athletes that I coach they work differently. And some people don't like to have the recovery time, and it's hard because you're telling them to recover and they don't want to recover.
So is that just like a bit of exploration and a bit of curiosity from your point as the coach, that you're able to just sort of, you have a plan A in your head, but you're willing to sort of chop and change that based on exploration and the feedback you have from the athlete that you're working with?
Yeah, nothing's set in stone, be it Scott, be it George, be it Becky, whoever it is, because every time they come to a training session, you don't know how anyone's going to react. They could have had a bad day at school, bad day at college, bad day at work, or they could have done some fitness at the school in the PE, so they're totally shattered. And sometimes they'll ring me at 5 o'clock. I said, look, just don't come, miss tonight and recover. And they'll listen and do that. And some of them push through. Then you notice halfway through the session, you have to tell them to stop. But I think you just gain that with experience as a coach. So it's all, once again, it's just communication. Speak to the athletes, and they've got to be honest with you. So if they're honest with me, then I'll say, right, yeah, if that's hurting, stop. There's no point continuing.
I think it's interesting having watched you and Scott interact in that coaching session, because you were talking about there, it's that you talk about the communication between the two of you and the relationship you have, and a lot of communication that you two have is non-verbal. So you've built that up over a long period of time. So you can just see by the way Scott moves or by the way he walks in the circle, whatever it might be, and you're able to adjust because of that. So that's like, yeah, I think that's something that coaches can do. Yeah.
And what I do with all the athletes is I talk to them after each throw. And I'm a big believer, you say, how did that feel? So you're trying to get them to tell you how it feels, because I can't throw it for them. But if they tell me how it feels, I get a better understanding, so then I can help them with the next throw.
Absolutely. Okay, I hope that's answered your question, Peter. So we've got a question in from Olivia. Do you think that Scott was put at a disadvantage for not lifting from an earlier age? I know there's been some discussion in the chat box already about this, whether Scott actually helped. But do you think that he was at a disadvantage for not lifting earlier?
No, 100% not. And I do it there. Everyone in my squad, it isn't just Scott. I get people, I don't say people, I get parents saying, why can't they lift? I get the athletes saying, why can't I lift? And to me, athletics isn't a short-term event. People can go to English schools, and I'm not trying to knock anyone who's done that and do well at English schools and everything else, but when you start throwing what I call big boy weights, like the senior shot put, senior javelins for boys and girls, that's when people get recognised. People remember when you've been to the Olympics, but not when you went to the English schools. So to me, if you lift too early, I'm not a professor or anything like this, but I just don't believe, I think it can affect your bone growth and your muscle growth. And I think it's good that people can learn lifts at a younger age, but using sticks. So learn how to do a clean, learn how to do a proper squat. I mean, the amount of athletes that come down and can't squat and they're 15, 16 years old, and they want to go in the gym, it kill the back or whatever else. And you see it happen so many times. Learn the technique first, then once you get to the right age, and I just do it on what I believe. I had one guy who was a farmer's son, and he was so strong he didn't need to go to the gym. And he started lifting, I think he was 17 when he lifted. He threw for England at 17. So lifting, and everyone's got their own opinion on that. So I'm not going to say I'm 100% right. And all it is it's just my own belief. Protect yourself, and the athlete's got to be protected, because when they're in the gym, there's no one there to watch them all the time. And that's when they'll get hurt and come down. One prime example, people might know Les Richards, who I used to coach, through 57 with a discus, 17 plus with a shot. He was squatting and he kept getting problems with his back. I said, don't squat, stop squatting, do a leg press. And he was an adult, he was like same age as Scott, but he carried on squatting and with a bad technique and going too heavy, and ended up having to have, and he had 2 bulging discs, and now he's trying to throw now, but he struggles. So sometimes you've got to listen to your body, but to me, technique's always key. So
yeah, I think just to flag, so there is, I know there's lots of people looking for like coach development opportunities at the minute. So there is a movement skills online modules that people can do. If they go through Athletics Hub, you can complete that, and it's backing up what Paul's saying there around get good at doing lots of movement in lots of different directions, and then you build up, you earn the right to sort of add load. Really, I think am I sort of capturing what you're saying there?
Yeah,
Paul?
yeah. I mean, Scott's post today says you learn the basics of lifting with only body weight and maybe a 20 kilo bar from 16 onwards, and then started properly at 18, and that's exactly what we did. So what Scott's put there is correct. So and people say to me, "No, well, how strong is Scott now? And it's like, well, strength isn't always everything. People think, oh, you've got to be able to bench press 250 kilos, squat 350 kilos. But you're only pushing a 7.26 kilo ball. So it's all the other factors that you've got to take into account. And people sometimes think strong's best. But if you can be fast and explosive and quite strong, to me, for Scott and for the other athletes, they'll go a lot further. And it'll protect them long term, because at the end of the day, they're not going to make a living out of athletics. So last thing you want them to be on the scrap heap at 20-year-old with a back that's had it. And then they struggle to work, and at 30, 40-year-old, they're crippled.
Yeah, well, that's good. I'll try to flag what Scott's put there. Another question in. So question from Brian. What exactly do you mean by wrap?
So what I mean, Brian, is, so when you come off the back, what Scott does, his left arm goes towards the left-hand sector, and then what he does is he holds it there, and what I call it is he grabs the pole and wraps into it. So his left, and he pulls into it and wraps into it, as if he's hugging himself, and then that allows his legs to work underneath him, so he can then work from the ground up. So we always say from the ground up. So he turns his foot, pushes the knee, then the hip, and then because he's wrapped, it's a bit like an elastic band. So if you twist an elastic band and let go of the top, it spins out really fast. So what we want Scott to do is to come out of that position and unravel the wrap. And by doing that, as well as using his body, by having the flexibility, it gives him more acceleration. So that's what I'm trying to explain by the wrap. Once again, it's easy to show someone.
Cool. Brian, I hope that's answered your question. There's a question in from Dominic, just asking to see any videos you've got. So I know that I haven't put any on this presentation.
No, but if anyone wants to email me, I'm happy to email. They're all on my phone, so I'm happy to email anyone. There's a lot on my Instagram page under Coach Paul Wilson. There's also a lot under Scott's Instagram page. So what we don't do is we normally just film the odd training throw for me and Scott. Sometimes Scott will post it, or I'll post it if it's been a good session, but we don't put what we're doing training on. We never film that, to be honest, because that's what I feel sometimes is you rely too much on your device, and then what you do is you get too technical. Whereas when you're doing a training session, I feel it's better to use the naked eye more than anything.
Yeah, I don't want to be an Instagram warrior and look really good in a slow-mo. You want to be able to maximize that speed of release. But yeah, and Scott's flagged there that, if you want to follow him on Instagram, he shares stuff through there. So he's put his tag into the group chat.
Yeah,
there.
Scott's really good. He answers people all the time as well.
Yeah, he's not a bad lad, really, is he?
No.
Yeah, question from Aaron. What drill do you do to keep that left arm up and left shoulder out to wrap? So any specific drills? You mentioned the grab and the pull.
Yeah, sometimes, and what we do sometimes as well is we get a TheraBand, and Scott will put it across his chest and expand right across his chest. So it's basically across where his nipples are. He's got to keep on his chest. So what we're trying to do there, that's more to work on keeping his shoulder up at the end. And so what he does is it stops him dropping his left shoulder. We've done it before where he has a bar across his shoulders. Some people use a 20 kilo bar, which I think we've got a 10 or a 12 kilo bar at the track. Or you could use a stick, and all you do is sit it on the back of your shoulders. So that's what we've been doing more to try and keep his left shoulder up. Just say grabbing the pole, or if your coach if you're confident enough, just stand near the middle of the circle, and they've basically got a turn, but they can't hit you with a hand. That stops them throwing it away, and instantly they become wrapped. And I say I've done that with Scott a few times.
Okay, thank you. Question in from Kevin. So, longer question. What are your thoughts on how we improve the quality of throwing in this country? Or is that we suffer from losing quality athletes to rugby? So I'm going to let you take this one first. I might have an answer on it, but you go for it.
I think the biggest problem we've got is we've got any big lads that go to rugby, go to cycling, and go to rowing. And a lot of it's because there's money in those sports.
It's not just lads as well. It's not just lads. Losing out to the
females.
Sports,
but I'm just talking about Scott. So I mean, Scott was a rugby player, a really good rugby player. and he had a bit of a back injury when he was playing. He was number 8 for his local team, and he was a good quality rugby player, so he wasn't just a run-of-the-mill player. But Scott made that decision turning 16, 17 that he was going to stop rugby altogether and concentrate on his athletics, and he enjoyed it and had the passion. I think the biggest problem we've got now in the UK for throws, and not just throws, we're talking about throws, but obviously all athletics, it's not on television anymore. It's not publicised anymore. And people don't see what goes on. And I think the other problem as well is in schools now, and people might hate me for saying it, is we're not competitive anymore. We're too nice. You do a sports day, if you come last, you've achieved. And to me, I always, as a coach and an athlete, I always want to win. So I want the athletes to do the best they can. That's how I feel I've won, is the athlete's got a PB. But to try and change it, I tried to do a virtual shot put competition in York a couple of years ago, a street competition, but I couldn't get a license for it. So it goes on abroad, and it'd be a massive spectator sport. Today I've made contact with, I won't go into too much depth, but a famous person who's got rights to a lot of programs on Sky about some ideas about bringing athletics to the TV. So I'm trying to make contact myself to try and get things promoted. But people need to see the sport. So whether you do street athletics, I know we do one a year sometimes, but do it for the kids as well. It's all right having the best athletes there, but they only show probably 2 or 3 disciplines. Let the kids go and have a go at it as well. I've got an idea for next year. I'm going to do a competition, hopefully in York, and possibly with Stuart Carlaw with the England Throws Camp in Northampton. And that's going to be really exciting if I can get it off the ground, which I think I want to do it. So I think that's going to get people involved, get schools invited, because you've got to start at the grassroots. And the biggest thing is now is getting the grassroots into the clubs and get them integrated, and getting coaches or athletes into the schools to help them and give them that encouragement that they need. So and there's no right answer at the moment. It's just, I think, and if there's more opportunities available for the athletes and for coaches, because at the end of the day, like I said right at the start, all the coaches are volunteers. You start losing coaches, you're not going to have the athletes. So that's just my own opinion on it. I'm trying to be quite polite about it as well.
Yeah, I think that the key was there, I'm sort of like hearing about the just trying to develop the love of athletics or the love of throwing, get that passion for it first, even from a young stage, whether that be going to see a competition or getting exposed to it in the first place. Because if people love it, they're more likely to continue and be retained within the sport, and that's essentially what we need within throwing. It takes a long time to get good at it, so we need to keep people in the sport and it be an actual viable option. There's always temptation. Many of you know that I'll work with Alan Tower, temptation to go to other sports because they can offer quite a lot of things. So we need to get the position where people love what we're doing, and then we're able to actually put some of those support services and additional support for the athletes and the coaches there to try and retain them both in the sport that little bit longer. Because if people stay in it and keep working hard and make those little bits of progress, then we get some good success long term. I mean, look what you and Scott have done. So yeah, for me, it's that develop that passion. But in order to get that passion and love of sport, is you've got to have some exposure and some understanding of what it's all about. So, well, I know really, really good from Kevin there. Question from Mike: how far do you think Scott could throw?
It's a hard question, Mike.
Full time.
Yeah, it's a really hard question because we haven't got a crystal ball. Like I said during the presentation, I like the fact that Scott still works, and I think Scott does as well, because what it does is it takes Scott's mind off athletics, so he's not thinking about the competition, not thinking about what he's going to do. And he thinks I said 26 meters, but I didn't. If he was it, the problem is for Scott to go full time or to go down in hours, he needs funding. So at the moment, Scott doesn't get any funding. He doesn't have any sponsorship. So he works 3 days a week, gets paid for that, and that's what he lives off. So he doesn't get there's nothing else that goes into his bank. So if he was to get extra 10, 15 grand a year, yes, that would help him. It'd allow him to have another day so off work, and if he needs more time off. Luckily, he works for his dad, and his dad's his whole family, his dad, mum and brother, are all very supportive, and so is his wider family. But going on to distance, I say I don't know. I'm one of these people. I'll never say what I think Scott can throw, and you can ask Scott the same.
Why put a limit on it? Why put a limit on it?
You can't put a limit on it. I know deep down what barriers he can break. But one thing I don't do is I would never tell Scott either, because otherwise, if you tell an athlete that, they expect, and then they want it quicker than what it will come. So what I think Scott will do, and I mean, I put on there long term, I want him to break the British record, and I know Scott wants to break Jeff's record. But past there, I've got ideas of what he could throw. And he spoke to Tom Walsh and he spoke to Ryan Whiting a few times in America, and obviously Tom from New Zealand, and they've said to him that they think he can throw 2150 plus all day long. So that's someone else who's seen that and that was when Scott was there a year or two ago. So. No, that's typical Scott.
Question from Brian. What weight loading?
Oh, now you're asking.
Year on year from 16 years onwards. So
I would say it is. It's really hard because in different exercises, and what we've done is we've changed the exercises. So what he was doing age 16, 17, 18, he doesn't do the similar exercises now because we evolve every year. But to give you an idea, from probably the last 3 or 4 years, I would say his weight, when we've gone for a specific exercise, I think 1 year his bench press went up 20%. And the year we wanted to attack his squats, we wanted to get stronger in his legs, that went up, Scott wishes, that went up 25%. So what we've done is we've tried to, if I've said, right, Scott, I feel you're weak in the chest in your bench press, for that winter, we've attacked it and said, right, we want to get your chest stronger. Or his physio's told us that his back's weak or something. We'll work on that area. And then, as I say, with squats, we did the same. I think, to give you an idea, when Scott was 18, he was squatting, I don't know, probably about 180 kilos and bench pressing 150 kilos, 140 kilos. And that's just natural. That wasn't doing anything different, if you know what I mean. That was just in working. But one thing we never do, and we never do 100% max. So we'll go up to probably, I always say it's probably about 92, 93% of his max, because I'm more bothered about him getting hurt. So when people go 100% out and say Scott's going to lift 300 kilos, full deep squat, there's a chance he's going to pop a knee, do his back, or do something to be out 6 months. Well, what's the point? Yeah, so we never do it.
Risk versus reward, but then you've also got to keep in mind what adaptation are you trying to create by doing that heavier squat.
Well, moving the weight slow, you're going to achieve a
shot. Yeah, exactly. So if it's not going to add distance, why would you do it in the first place?
Well, it's all the weight Scott does. Even when we're doing heavy, we still want the weight to move fast. So it's not going to be weight over speed. We try and do speed over weight. So it's as heavy as he can go, but he's got to move it fast. If it's too slow, he's got to take 10 kilos off. I think that's something we learn.
That tapped into like moving things with intent. If anyone knows anything about rate coding, you'll know that's all about that. So good question, though. Next question in. We've got another one from Brian. Yeah, does Scott train with lighter shot for speed / explosive release?
He does train with a lighter shot, but not for speed or explosive release. Some people think it's for that reason. A lot of it's for him to work more on his technique. So we want his technique to be faster. The speed of release comes, but I mean, I actually found some figures just if anyone's interested. In October, we did use something called Flight Scope. Sean Pickering was good enough for us to use it. And we went down there and we used a 6.7 kilo in October, and then used a 7.25 kilo shot in March. And just to give you an idea of the differences, you would think in that time that it would be his speed of release would be slower because he's throwing a heavier shot, but it was actually faster. So the release angle was different. He was throwing higher. He broke it because it was too fast. But what happened was the distance. He actually threw the 7.25 further. But what we used to do is we used to go up to an 8 kilo shot and then drop down for the season. And that was probably about 3 years ago. And what we found was that Scott was losing his speed in the circle. So what we do now is we've, once again, I've Sean Pickering, we've got what's called a vario shot. So you can adjust the weight from 6.5 to 7.5 kilos. So what we do is in the winter, we go quite light. So Scott's getting back into throwing. What it also does, it protects his fingers, protects his elbow. And then we just do like after so many weeks, we increase the weight. And then what we normally do is come up to a shot competition. When it's the actual time of the competition, what he's done recently, he just throws the normal shot. So, but what we're trying to do is just keep it similar. So it won't jump from like a 6, whatever it might be, 6.5 to a 7.26 because his timing will be too off. But we just try and do gradual weight differences. But as I say, yeah, some people say it's so you can get more explosive release, but it's more to keep the technique balanced and so he can be quicker on his feet because he's really light on his feet anyway. And then once he goes on to the 7.25, there's no point throwing a 6 kilo or 6.5 really far and fast with your arm speed. Go to a 7.26 and you drop 2 meters. I've seen it happen before, and so you've got to try and keep relatively similar. And that's what I said. That's what we do anyway. And that's what works for us.
I hope that answers your question, Brian. Question from Matthew. Do you think rotation makes shot more interesting for spectators and increase engagement? I tend to lose shot putters to hammer.
I think spectator-wise, if you look at what happened at the World Champs last year with the last round of the shot put, that's probably the best competition I've ever seen. When Kovacs came out and threw 22.91, and then Tom and Ryan, that atmosphere would have been amazing, electric in the stadium. And I think once again, I think it's just down to the engagement that you have with the athletes and spectators. I think what I find is hammer and javelin throws. People watch that because it goes a long way, so they want to see a javelin go 80, 90 meters because it's something that they think, oh wow, that's massive. Throwing a shot 22, 23 meters doesn't look very far, but it actually is. But until you're actually out there and see how far it is and how heavy the shot is, so I think it's that bit of getting integration with the athletes, with the spectators. But to lose shot putters to hammer throwing, as coaches and athletes, to me, it's more a case of it's where their passion is. And if you as a coach believe they could be a better shot putter than a hammer thrower, then that's what you go for. I had a girl who used to come down who came to me as a hammer thrower, and she tried doing some discus. I said, well, your discus is so much better already at a beginning stage. We'll change on to discus. So it's a case of having that trust, and if they trust that your opinion's correct, then they'll stick to that event. But why not let them try all events? When you get to a certain standard of competition, that's when you probably need to select one and stick to that one because you have too much crossover. But I think it's just a case of making the event appealing. Like John Molan posted earlier, David Stall's doing one tomorrow, street competition. If you do a street shot put competition, when they do the Manchester Street Games or the Gateshead Street Games, you could easily have a shot put competition on the street. They've done it before, Reese Hoffer. So that gets people engrossed into it and interested.
What I would love, I know that's because I'm from the Northeast, but I would absolutely love a discus competition over the Tyne. I think that as part of the Great City Games, that would be a really, really good spectacle to see someone lobbing a discus over the Tyne would be brilliant. So
yeah, exactly. If you could do that,
I could live in hope though. But another good question from Matthew. Got a question in from Joe Wayne. So it's about the testing. So what testing do you do with Scott?
The only testing we do, Joe, is we do, as I say, we only do it in Portugal. We only do it once a year, and it's more for fun. We try and make the sessions as fun as possible because we don't want. They've got the testing when they come to the competition, so we just try and have a laugh and a joke a lot of the time. But they do the overhead shot, we do the standing long jump and 30-meter sprint. That's the main test that we do there. The only other testing we do is we do sometimes standing box jumps, and when Scott's in the gym, sometimes, obviously we can't at the moment, sometimes every 8 to 10 weeks we'll test where he's at maximum wise. And like I said earlier, it's not 100% max, it's probably about around 92, 93% max. And I judge it if I think he can go heavier. So whether Scott says it, and this is the only time that I'll actually say to Scott, no, stop. And it's not just Scott, it's with the other athletes in the squad. If I think they've lifted heavy enough, that's as far as they go. So that's the only testing we do.
I think Scott's also done some testing as part of the junior program.
He's done the talent program. Yeah, he's done the jumps and stuff.
Yeah, so like squat jump, counter movement jump, drop jump, and then we've got some tests for mobility. So we do knee to wall, we do a Thomas test, we do a seated thoracic test and overhead squats and things, and then we also do some jumping sticks, so double leg and single leg jumping sticks. So now Scott's in the senior talent program, he chooses whether he does those ones or not, but all the athletes that are on the junior program do those. So there's some of the stats. Another question in, so from Olivia. So thank you, Olivia, for your question. Do you think it's more difficult for a rotational thrower to perform indoors in comparison to a linear thrower?
The only time I think that, and Scott will be better off answering that, the only time that happens more is when the circle's slippy. So because it's a wooden circle normally indoors, what you find is, and that's when Scott has struggled before, he's had to put a trainer on because the circle at the back of the ring is slippy. When you try and push off the back, you can't, and your foot slips. The rest of the throw, I wouldn't say it's harder for a linear thrower or a rotational thrower. You're still throwing into a net, you're still throwing into the same sector. If anything, the only things I don't like about the indoors is, one is the atmosphere, as in the air atmosphere, because it can be very different, and sometimes you can be sat in the stands, it feels quite warm, but on the track it's actually cold. But the only difference I would say is because of the wooden circles. So someone's put there, oh, Scott's done it, there you go. Get painted surfaces, and it can be more challenging. But that said, Scott's started practice on a wooden circle this year, so now he's been outdoors on a wooden circle for 3 months. He'll find it a lot easier come next year for the indoors, hopefully anyway.
So I don't know whether Olivia saw the webinar that we did last week, and it was a bit of a comparison between step back, glide and rotation. So there might be some things you can kind of learn from those ones. So that should be on Athletics Hub. If it's not already on there, it should be on within the next week or so. So yeah, just maybe have a look at that, and then it compares those across the way. So that's on Athletics Hub and it's free to have a look through. Question from Kevin. How far are we off a second or third thrower around the 20-meter mark?
I'll be honest, I don't honestly know. Lewis Bing's thrown what we saw just over 20 meters, 20.08 with a 6 kilo. And what everyone finds is when you move from the 6 to the 7.26, it's not an easy transition. So to throw a 20 with that's probably equivalent to about 17.50-18 with a 7. Lewis and Stuart might disagree, but that's what I would expect. And if he threw mid-18s, that would be even better. Yusuf's got the ability without a doubt. I'd love to see Yusuf break 19, obviously 19 initially, and then come after that 20 meters. So yeah, it'd be great to have 3 of them over 20 meters. I mean, there's a couple of other guys.
What about Sophie McKenna? Do you think she could go there long term?
I don't. I've not worked with a girl who can throw as far as Sophie does. So to try and, for me, it'd be like a learning thing again, like I've done with Scott. I've coached girls throwing 14 meters, 15 meters plus, and it's a different ball game throwing, like what Amelia's throwing and what Sophie is throwing. I think Sophie's got the right setup. I mean, obviously she worked with Jeff for a number of years. Now she's with Mike and Judy Oakes, and she's got someone there who's actually been there and done it. Oh, there you go. Lewis has said that his son's going to throw 20 meters in 5 years. So he'll be 20.
Great to see that come through. And he's been doing really well at the Valhalla competitions, hasn't he? So
yeah, and he threw.
He beat me as an under 17 lad when I was throwing the 5K. Not that I'm competitive in the slightest. But
you should have screenshot that for Lewis in 5 years. But I mean,
it's been great.
It's hard for me to say about 20 meter throws because if I'm totally honest, and I try not to like tell people fibs or anything, I only look at the athletes I coach. So because Lewis is with Stuart and Yusuf trains with Scott and other people, I don't know what they do. I don't know what they do in the gym, what they do in the technique or anything. And at the end of the day, it's none of my business either. So I don't know who's up and coming and who can do it. I know Donovan, who, Lewis's son. I mean, he's got his grandfather, and obviously Lewis has been there and done it as well. So he's got a great system, works. But once again, it's whether Donovan, like a lot of big lads, end up going to rugby. Fingers crossed Donovan will stay in the spot. So that's the biggest problem why we haven't had 20-metre throws since Jeff, Matt Proctor, Carl Myerscough, people like that, because a lot of them now do go into the other sports.
Yeah. It'd be exciting to see that. I hope that we get to that point.
Oh, that'd be great.
In the next 5 years. Question from David Sweeney. What percentage age intensity do you throw at? Oh, no, sorry. I read that wrong. What percentage intensity do you throw at in practice? How many full intensity throws can you tolerate per session? So I don't know whether Scott wants to answer this as well, but from your perspective, Paul, what intensity are you throwing at, and how many are you planning at that intensity?
We don't plan on how many to do at full intensity. I mean, today I would say Scott started at about 50-60% of flat out, and then what we'll normally do is increase it until Scott's getting that feeling. Once he gets the feeling, he'll start going for it. But what we normally do is we just go for technique. So we're not trying to throw 100% all the time. We're just trying to get Scott to feel it, and if he's feeling up for it, then he'll start going for it himself anyway. So I don't need to say, look, go for a flat out throw. And then going by how many, it varies. So some sessions I might be able to do 2 or 3 flat out. Some sessions I might do 10 flat out. But what we're trying to do, we use training for training and the competitions for the competition. So, there you go. Scott's put that. It depends how I'm feeling and how his body is. So, like today, we're just getting back into it because he had a tight back. So we both said he wasn't going to throw 100% today, and he didn't. He still threw a decent distance, but what he was doing, he was getting the feeling back. So, like I said earlier, we work a lot on feeling, and that's when you get the feeling, the throw actually comes from it.
I'm just conscious of time. And people, if you do need to go, that's absolutely fine. When you are going, you'll get sent a feedback form. So we do really take all of that sort of stuff on board. So if you could give a score and then also your feedback, and if there's anything that you want to see in future webinars or whatever, please stick it in there. So if you do need to go, that's absolutely fine.
Anyone can as well.
Yeah. But we've got a few more questions. So if you're happy to still keep going, Paul, we'll flag some of these on. So we've got a question in from Dominic about where you can get some of these variable weight shots. And I know
Nerf Athletics do one. I think.
Greg's flagged Nerf already.
Also, if you get in touch with Sean Pickering, he actually makes his own now, and that's what Scott's using, and it's really good. And then also, if you go online and look at, Scott will know better than me. I think it's called the Walsh Shot. Which comes from it comes from America. It's what Tom Walsh and Ryan Whiting have devised. And once again, that's an adjustable shot. And the good thing is that the ball doesn't move. The ball doesn't change size. You just take one shot if you want to go abroad or to training. You just adjust it using an Allen key. So it means that you don't have to take 3 or 4 shots with you all the time. So it's a real good tool without a doubt. There you go.
Flagging it on there. Another question in. So just undo that one. More of a comment, sorry. Comment rather than a question. Glider's not dead, I think.
No, it's not dead, no.
So top 3 or 4 plyometric exercises you do for throwers now, given the lack of gym facilities at the moment.
So what the throwers are doing at the moment, they'll do bounds if they've got access to stairs. We used to out of Royal Track, we used to have a great set of stairs. So we do bounds up the stairs, missing a step, missing 2 steps, hops up the stairs, 2-footed bunnies up the steps. Most people can find a set of stairs even at your own house. Doing lunges, or what you can also do is the way you drive off one leg onto the other leg and hold for a second. and drive across. Get a set of ladders. They're cheap enough to buy online. Doing high knees, doing side to side. We do stuff like fast feet as well. So there's loads of different exercises.
Yeah,
I think the top 3 or 4. Go on.
God, I was just going to say about with plyometrics, just sort of like capture some of that stuff you're saying. Like, I think a lot of time with plyometrics, people thinking it's just like double leg. So it's double leg, single leg, but then also you can think, well, am I doing it for distance? Am I doing it for height? Am I going forwards? Am I going backwards? Am I going sideways? The key to plyometrics is that it's got a really short contact time. So the time on the floor is really fast. So just vary the different directions. Yeah, that's sort of quite key, I think, because there's a huge bit of variety that people can get from plyometrics. It's not just.
But it's what it also suits that athlete. So, like for Scott, as I say, we don't do loads of plyometrics, basically because of his size, and we don't want any injuries on his knees or on his shins. So, but then the other athletes that are able to do better plyometrics, and they can do them as well. So I always try and do it. It's more individual, unless we're doing like a squad session. But like you say, there's plenty to do. You can do anything at home. You can use a chair and jump off a chair, or do depth drop off a chair. Try and jump over it. Put some sticks in the garden. Try and jump over them.
Cool. Thank you very much for that question. That's all the questions that we've got in now.
Right.
As Paul's already said, like, he will answer, I'm sure, questions if we were to fire it across to his England Athletics email, so pwilson at englandathletics.org. But also, if you wanted to contact him through social media and things, I know him and Scott are both really helpful and supportive of the throws community through them. So yeah, just a big thank you to you, Paul, for that really interesting presentation, but also all of those responses to the questions. And a big thank you to everyone for attending. There will be another presentation and webinar next Thursday night, so we're going to keep to this Throws Thursday from 7:30 till 8:30. So we'd love to see you continue to engage with us through this difficult time and kind of invest in your development. So yeah, thanks very much for coming along. Really appreciate it.
No, thanks as well.